Thank you, Rob, and welcome everyone. Today we meet in virtual space as we've done for a couple of years now, acknowledging that we gather on the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe who've lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. Beyond this awareness, we call ourselves to uplift the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous peoples of this land and beyond. Today, I find myself yo-yoing between despondence, gritty determination, and appreciation for the promise of a temperate, sunny day. We'll be talking today about sweeps, how to support people living in vehicle homes. I think about the City of Tacoma's 2017 declaration of homelessness as an emergency for health, and the Pierce County's 2022 Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness. Both of these provide a response and policy framework and important funding commitments to mitigating the effects of homelessness. But the sweeps go on, even though there are no real vacancies anywhere. And the G Street block I live on cannot sustain for long the additional campsites or vehicle homes that increase after people without options are removed from other sites. In fact, this unsustainable site may be swept itself before long. Where can the people go and how long before they're removed from any other space they find? This is the source of my despondence and anger too. My sense of gritty determination comes from knowing that there are so many individuals and groups taking on the challenge of making this reality different. Large and small social service organizations provide and manage congregate shelters, shelters with spaces for individuals and families, tiny homes, permanent supportive housing, case management, and more. Today, though, I want to honor specifically the small nonprofit organizations that have stepped up to this emergency, sometimes with little experience of providing these kinds of services, but with a mission of presence to the most vulnerable among us and a sense of urgency. These groups often operate on a shoestring, with some completely funded through private donations, sometimes having small foundation grants, and sometimes wading into the bureaucratic waters of government contracting. As we've heard in our meetings, making these contracts work can be a huge challenge, and the small nonprofits do not have the financial reserves to wait months for reimbursement procedures. We need more creative contracting to maximize the potential of these small groups to respond to the housing emergency with their passionate desire to be of use. And when I thought of that, to be of use, I was reminded again of a poem I've read here once before, but it just seemed to fit so well. It's Marge Piercy's poem, To Be of Use. So I offer that to us this morning as an inspiration to us all to center our work. The people I love the best, says Piercy, jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in and the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing, well done, has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn, these are put in museums, but you know they were meant to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and the person for work that is real. So a shout out to our small nonprofit groups, you know who you are, who keep on doing the work that must be done. Thank you very much. And welcome to everybody today. I so appreciate all of the energy here, and it really does help with my despondence. So to welcome you, first, just a few ideas for anybody who's new about how we operate. For everybody who's been here, this is repetition, but it's still important, I think, to say. We ask that you, when you are not speaking, keep yourself on mute so we don't hear any distractions in the background. And also, if you're doing other things, to turn off your video so we don't see a lot of activity happening also in the background. And we ask that when you want to be recognized, that you use the raise hand function that Zoom provides. And if you don't have access to that for some reason, wave your hand madly and somebody will notice you and let Rob know that you're wanting to speak. We also use the chat for networking during the session, and that's fine. Ask any question you have there. And in fact, if you find yourself wanting to speak a lot, try to put some of your comments in the chat so that leaves room for others to speak as well. So with that, we have a set of norms that we do ask you to follow during our conversation. And those are that we want to be aware of the power dynamics we have. Some of us talk a lot, some of us not much. So let's encourage one another, challenge ideas and not people, listen to learn, having one person speak at a time. We're pretty good at some of these. Speak from our own experience. We're not preaching to the choir, but we can speak from our own experience and make space for others, but take up space so that we can hear the wisdom that we all have to share. So with those norms, I invite anyone who's new or returning from being away for a while to just raise your hand to be recognized. Let us know your name, and if you're associated with an organization, to let us know what that is so we can network with you as we go. So great, we have 3 people ready to do already. So Bill.
Good to see you all. Again, I am on your agenda, so I don't know how much I need to say. I direct the Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness in King County, and we're working pretty heavily on vehicle residency. We also were able to get a bill passed a few years ago with one of your colleagues, Jeffrey Boyce, on faith communities hosting the homeless, which I know is still a conundrum for people who legislate because they want a permit, but that may be another meeting. Thanks. Good to be with you.
Thank you, Bill. And I'm so glad you were able to join us today. Ty.
Hi, my name is Ty Moore. I work with Home in Tacoma for All, a new coalition pushing on city council to pass a package of renters' rights, a social housing developer, and to make sure that new development is green and sustainable. And I think I'm on the agenda too, to talk to y'all about the work we're doing and explore options for collaboration. But yeah, very excited to be here. I have a work meeting I have to be at 9:45, so I'm not sure exactly what the agenda is, but hopefully can talk to y'all before then.
Thank you, Ty, and I know Rob will try to make that possible. So Tom and then Leo.
Hi, I've actually attended once before, but that was a few weeks back. I'm the new housing program manager for Beacon Health Options, and glad to be here. We have a couple of homeless service programs, and we're just trying to make sure that we are educated about efforts in Pierce County. Thank you.
That's great, Tom. Well, welcome. And can you say the name of the organization again?
Beacon.
Oh,
just Beacon Health Options. Usually just referred to as a Beacon.
thank you. I just didn't quite hear it. So thanks very much and welcome. And Leo.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Leo Gruba. I am the new career development manager here at the Tacoma Rescue Mission. I've already worked with several of the organizations represented here today to bring equitable and secure career development and employment back to our neighbors experiencing homelessness. And I'm really excited to be here and be part of the meeting and find out what it is I can do to empower everyone here for like goals. So thank you for having me.
Welcome, Leo. It's wonderful to have you too. So that's really great. And if any of you can put your contact information in the chat, that will be useful for others to make contact with you outside of the meeting. Anyone else I am not seeing? All right, Rob.
All right. Thank you very much, Rosemary, for kicking us off. And one more reminder is just you heard Rosemary urge folks to put their contact information in the chat. We use the chat extensively in these meetings, and so and we use them as an archive for information that could be found on our pchomeless.org website after this meeting. So Don't worry about putting information in the chat. It's not going to be a distraction. In fact, it's a tool to build our community knowledge. So let's move on to our first item on the agenda this week. And it's the same item that we do at the beginning of every meeting, talking about what's happening this week on the streets. This is an opportunity for folks to share what they've seen changing, what needs have been identified in the last week, and then also to talk about, unfortunately, as we know, and as I sent out and relayed to the full coalition mailing list, we continue to have nearly weekly sweeps happening within the city of Tacoma. So we can talk about that issue. And in particular, I know there's some interest in talking about what is scheduled to happen at 7th and Tacoma Avenue next week. So with that being said, enough from me. I see Jeffrey has his hand up, and let's go ahead and talk about what's happening out on the streets. Jeffrey?
Good morning. Driving my wife to work this morning, I drove by a couple areas. Right behind TG, there are 3 big tents set up across from their parking lot. Let's see. Yakima is starting to get crazy again down around 14th Avenue. I don't know what to say about that. It's with all these sweeps and no place to go, this is what people do, is they tend to congregate, they come together. And until the city and the county have places for these people to go, this will be a weekly thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Others with observations?
Yeah, sorry, you guys, really quickly. So we did the sweep on 11th and under the 11th Street Bridge. And we also went down yesterday to 7th and Tacoma. And we need solutions. Like, this is really the time to start voicing to our leadership just how incredibly painful this is for people, and to really try to reflect to them and allow them to empathize with what they're doing to others, because it needs to stop, and that's the only way it's going to happen. Looking at somebody who has had stitches in where his toes were been for the last 6 months because of neglect, and they're about to sweep in tomorrow, is incredibly intolerable, inhumane, and something needs to be done. And the only thing that can be done is the voice of the people interfering with what they want to do. So please get out there, start writing letters, go to these council meetings where there is open statement, put it out there wherever you can, write letters, put it in social media, get your message across that human beings deserve to be treated right and deserve housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Ed, I see your hand up as well.
Yes, I was at the sweep underneath the bridge, and it's an intolerable situation. And I have made an argument with using the Holmes-Ray scale of stress management. And the numbers on that scale come out in a inhumane situation. And so I think, well, last Sunday, the call was to please stop killing our people, because whether they know it or not, we know that the deaths of homeless people are getting younger. And that right now, a homeless person who dies on the street, the average loss of time is 25 years. And if any of us just take our age and subtract 25 years, that's a long time to lose. And much of it is due to stress. So yeah, please echo the call to please stop killing our people.
Thank you, Ed. And Sally, your hand's up as well.
Yeah, I saw the person sleeping in a doorway along Martin Luther King this week. That's the first time I've seen somebody sleeping in a doorway in a long time. And I don't know for sure, but would suspect that that person's been displaced enough times that that felt like the only choice for a place to sleep. Obviously not safe, obviously not comfortable. I also took water around during the days that at my house were 92 and 87 this past week, and I continue to think that the response to weather emergencies is woefully inadequate at the public sector level. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. And I wanted to put, this is probably known to Ed and Jeffrey and Richard, who's not in the room at the moment, but last night I was down in the Tide Flats area, and I did run past the 11th Street, ran over the 11th Street Bridge, but also 15th Street that connects to D Street. There is lined with RVs. RVs and folks living in their vehicles. And so as we're doing outreach, I'm unsure how many folks have been doing water distribution to that group, but there's clearly a population that's been pretty consistently there for the last, at least the last 4 or 5 weeks. And I would presume some of the folks from 11th Street, from under 11th Street, may move and join that community. So just put that on our radar for a couple of reasons. One, because it could surely become a target for the next round of sweeps, but then also because people are living their lives there on the side of the street. So Davina, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, Davina Schwab from the Tacoma Rescue Mission Outreach. Our team has been out mostly spending a lot of time out at Milwaukee and the 11th Street Bridge, and the team has just been feeling kind of hopeless because there's not a whole lot of options to offer to people. What we're seeing is that there's a lot of people in RVs and cars, and safe parking isn't an option for them because of the type of vehicles they have. And when we've actually even got a couple housing opportunities for them, but how scary that is to somebody who now has to leave 1 to 2 trailers with the generators and everything that they've worked so hard to get, and then go into a place that they don't know if they are going to be able to keep, or have to this whole level of responsibility. So they're scared, right? So there's not a whole lot of places, and it feels like we don't have a whole lot of options to provide. So that's been tough. We did hear that a lot of those people are planning on migrating over down towards Puyallup. So that's kind of what we have. I also noticed there's a lot more people on Portland between 72nd and down by the I-5. A lot of people just on the streets, in the doorways. I see it every morning when I'm going to work, and I see it every evening when I'm coming home. So there's more and more people everywhere, and just not enough options. And when they're doing these sweeps, we're just moving people. We're breaking up their houses. We're taking all of the things from them, and it's like it's not helping. It's not helping. We're just moving them, and it's inhumane, and it's got to stop. We have to have other options to be able to provide to people, because I'm preaching to the choir, so but yeah, that's kind of what we've been seeing and what we've been doing out in the streets.
Thank you, Davina, and thank you for what you're doing. One question I'd have for you, how many folks are you still seeing on Milwaukee Avenue?
I believe I have to ask my team because my team is the one that goes out, but this morning at huddle, they believe that that most of them are gone. So yeah. I'll have to ask my team the exact numbers.
Yeah. And of course, the big challenge is that as soon as people leave a spot where they found some sort of stability, everyone who's trying to do outreach, your team and other teams, then you got to go find people again.
Exactly.
Reestablish those relationships. So it's just, yeah, we're just causing more trauma and making it harder for the outreach. Let's see. I'm seeing a lot of activity in the chat and I appreciate that. And it looks like Courtney Kenneth might be able to have a connection for you there. Yeah, and Sally, I appreciate your comment as well that we're crowding people into smaller and smaller spaces, which leads me to Teresa, can you share what the experience is like this week on G Street? And so far the city of Tacoma has only reached out to me about posting a sweep at 7th and Tacoma Avenue. I know we've had concerns that the G Street neighborhood could become another target for a sweep, but I'm curious if things are started to stabilize at all, or what it's looking like outside in your neighborhood, Teresa.
So we keep getting new people, and every time there's a sweep, the whole neighborhood there's a huge intake of breath, because we know there are going to be people are having to shoehorn their tents in between other tents, and it's become almost completely unwalkable. So yeah, I just can't even believe that a campsite as close to us as that one is, that the city is looking at sweeping it without actually having some options for people that are actually going to keep them from moving into the neighborhoods like ours. Ours is not the only place that's being pushed in. There are other campsites, and if you live near them or you're in them, you know what they are, and it makes it impossible for people to have any quality of life. It's just constant pressure on the people who are currently staying here from new people coming in and pushing people aside. So I want to say a bright note though. Jan and her medical team are making a difference. They're out there. I just love walking around with Jan, because she will say to people, do you know where you need to go to get help? And she deals directly with people right where they're at, with the open sores she sees, with the issues she sees, and that's been really heartening.
Great. Yeah, and I appreciate your looking towards some positives. That's helpful to keep us all going. Ed.
Just a comment, because someone is in an RV doesn't mean they don't need water. That's an assumption. Yes, RVs have water tanks in them, but they can be dry. So please don't make that assumption.
Thank you, Ed. And we got about another minute or so left on our agenda for this item. Do folks have any other critical pieces of information they'd like to share with the group? Okay, so I see Caleb is in the room. I know he'll be able to speak in the city update about what's been posted for the sweep at 7th and Tacoma Avenue. And I'm sure he's taking in what we're saying as well. So appreciate that. And let's move on to our first presentation of the morning. And that is a community spotlight presentation from the folks at Rebuilding Hope, the Sexual Assault Center for Pierce County. So Ash and Ashley, I'm not sure which one of you is going to kick us off here.
I can kick us off. Can I be given screen sharing capabilities?
Yeah, just give me 1 second and I can do that here. Let's see. All right, you should be able to do that now.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Awesome. Yes. So we are Rebuilding Hope. I am Ash. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I am the education and resource coordinator at Rebuilding Hope.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Ashley, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the community advocate. And we're going to go ahead and get started on our presentation today. So we just wanted to give everyone an overview of the population we are able to serve. We primarily work with primary or secondary victims, so that could mean somebody that did receive incident related to sexual violence, but also another partner, maybe a family member, a friend, some type of relationship to the actual primary victim, which would make them the secondary victim. We would also be able to service them as well. We also service people that are typically 13 and older, with the exception of our STEP program. They can take 12-year-olds and older. We also have Children's Assistance Advocacy Center advocate, and her name is Taylor, and she can serve the 12 and under population to fill that gap. And we like to remind everybody that we're able to serve anybody that had a previous incident or a more recent incident. There's no time limitation on who we're able to serve. This is all client-led. So we also have individual populations like incarcerated survivors, and we'll be able to assist them as well. Next slide. All right, so these are our 4 major programs. I'll be talking about therapy and advocacy, and then I'll hand it off to Ash for them to present. So for therapy, we mainly help with one-on-one sessions, but we can also do family therapy as well, but it's solely focused on the sexual violence incident. It's not going to lead to other types of therapy, so we always make sure to let our clients know that it's just going to be focused on that sexual violence aspect. And we have a great therapy team that's able to assist them through that process. Our second one is advocacy. And as you guys can see, the RCW is the part of Title 70. And that just tells everybody that a survivor is allowed to have an advocate, and we're allowed to be in the room, and we're able to assist them through that process, whatever it may look like. And we also let our clients know that this whole program is centered around them and empowering them through their healing process, and they have the choice to choose what program they would like and what resources they would like to receive from us. First, we have our 24/7 hotline, and that is confidential. That could be anywhere from crisis intervention to just simply answering questions, from anybody that is calling our hotline. We also have our hospital accompaniment, and that means that we'll be there for the survivor if they would like during their sexual assault nurse examination at a hospital. And we'll just be there simply as their advocate, answer any questions they may have, let them know what their rights are, and walk them through that process. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight our Children's Advocacy Center advocate, Taylor. She is one of our more specialized advocates because she is able to assist with that 12 and under population. And then myself, because I'm the housing advocate, I will be able to assist any of our survivors with their housing needs. So that's why I attend this meeting every week, to make sure I can provide them the greatest options and, just connect with everybody here to help those survivors. So I appreciate everybody here for that. And we're also a trip partner, so I work really closely with Dana, so I appreciate her for that as well. But I will now pass it off to Ash, and they're going to talk about STEP and prevention education.
Yes, we also have our sex trafficking and exploitation prevention program. So a lot of this is wraparound case management. We really want to make sure we're meeting survivors where they are at. A lot of folks who are being trafficked or are engaging in sex work, a lot of times they are not able to immediately get out of that because they have gotten into that because a lot of times of the subordination that they face, financial issues, a lot of different things. So we really make sure we meet them where they're at. So a lot of that looks like bringing them groceries, we have different safer sex materials. We also can help with hotel stays as well, especially for folks just in general, but definitely we've had a lot of folks who are getting out of sex trafficking or working on getting out of sex trafficking, and we offer that as well. And then my program is prevention education. So I get to do all the really fun presentations with folks. So I get to work with K through 12 kiddos. I get to talk to community organizations. I do a lot of different presentations. So it's a lot around consent, around boundaries, around relationships. And I try to engage folks as much as possible, just have the conversations that aren't had as much or can be really taboo and hard for folks to have. And a lot of times, especially with the kiddos, I try to also work with their parents as well, because, you know, then kids come home and they have more questions for parents. And so I do a lot of work with parents and community folks as well. And then for all of our programs, we really work on making sure they are non-judgmental. Again, making sure we are meeting clients where they are at. Every survivor is so different, and how they come into our services is always going to be different. So we really try and make sure that's non-judgmental. We make sure it's client-led and client-driven. So I'll talk about that quickly as far as the referral process when I get to our phone numbers and everything. But so if y'all call, we ask that either the client calls or you call with the client has given you permission. We really want to make sure that the client is choosing to be a part of our services. That's really important for us. We always really want to make sure it's trauma informed. So especially our therapists, we do a lot of trauma informed training. It's very important that we're understanding, again, that every survivor is so different and shows up so differently. And then confidential as well. So again, our 24/7 hotline is confidential. We do talk to clients about mandatory reporting, but we really make sure they know that beforehand. So if they want to remain anonymous on the hotline, they are able to, and they're able to still receive our services, and we won't have to do any mandatory reporting. And then this is our contact info. I would say for this group, your main contact would be Ashley. So her contact is here, and also we can make sure to put that in the chat. And then if you do want me in any of your spaces, if you do want me to start any conversations with folks that you work with community orgs, anything like that, definitely reach out to me with that email. But yeah, Rob, you unmuted. Do you have a question or a...
No, I was just gonna see if other folks had questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? We doing okay?
You're doing all right.
Okay.
We probably need to wrap up here in a minute or so, but if there are questions, Davina, I see your hand up.
And I don't know if it was already said, so I apologize, but is this gender specific?
Do you mean for as far as who we serve?
Yes.
No, it is not.
Okay.
No, we do acknowledge that, again, the sexual violence movement has been very focused on people with specific identities, specifically like white cisgender women. And also we have continually and are continually working on making sure that we serve everyone, and we serve everyone of all genders. So yeah, of course.
And there is a question in the chat from Patricia. I don't know if you're able to see that.
Okay, so monitoring for reprieve and not for current lifestyle. So do you mean for folks who are maybe not currently engaging in sex work?
Yeah, I mean, you said you have hotel stays for sex workers, you know. I imagine those are supposed to be utilized for like kind of reprieve, stepping back, looking at life, but an experience in different places with hotel stays in regards to homelessness, those are actually utilized for the lifestyle itself and sex work. So I'm just curious how that is sort of monitored, or if it's provided for that way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That is actually something I will reach out to our STEP program about, but especially we do try and make sure, again, we're meeting clients where they're at. So I don't even know if they necessarily ask folks if they are in reprieve or if they are currently engaged in sex work. I don't necessarily know if they even ask that question of them. I think they might just provide the hotel, because again, you know, it is very hard for people to get out of sex work if they're wanting to get out and if they are being trafficked. And so I can definitely check in with our STEP program.
Great. And then Zev has his hand up, and there's one other question in the chat, but maybe you can address that in the chat. So
yeah,
go ahead, Zev.
Hey, Ash. I was just wondering, I get a lot of clients who are like actively fleeing DV. Do y'all like provide shelter for people who are actively fleeing? Like, is that something that's available? Because I've had clients in the past who've come through and are fleeing, and I call like every shelter between here and Seattle, and everywhere is full.
Is everywhere full.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I would say so. As far as fleeing, we have had clients, and this is specifically to our sex trafficking program. We have had clients who are fleeing, who we do offer those hotel stays to, or like transportation to a safe person, to someone who they can stay with. As far as DV, I could always get you connected to Crystal Family Jetson Center. I don't know, or if you already have their contact info. I would say for clients who are fleeing domestic violence specifically, they would probably be the main folks to reach out to. You do? Okay, perfect. I figured. But yeah, so I would reach out to them for that specifically. And I don't know your success with that, with reaching out to them, but that is something we also have are having a hard time with, is for folks fleeing. Just the spaces available are very limited. So that's something we're definitely talking about a lot as an agency. Did that answer your question? Yeah, they all have long wait lists. I know. And that's, I feel like that is a very big example of, again, like the lack of housing just for everyone in general, but also for folks who are immediately needing one because they are fleeing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So thank you, Ash and Ashley, for the presentation. It sounds like it'd be great if you could share your contact information again in the chat. And just if you have a moment, peruse and see if there are other questions there. I do know we need to get on to our next topic, but appreciate you sharing about this resource in the community. Thank you. All right. So I can tell this is going to be an information-rich morning. So let's shift gears over to have Bill Kirlin Hackett talk to us a little bit about your perspectives on what you're working on with safe parking and RV parking. You heard earlier in our On the Streets section that our community's very similar to King County, dealing with similar challenges, maybe less far down the road in dealing with those challenges than you are in King County. So I would love to hear your perspective, Bill.
Sure, and good to be with you. I think you all know how challenging it is to deal with persons living in vehicles, and especially people in RVs. When Jeffrey asked me to come, he mostly brought up the long decision, and I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to be very brief about it, but I will send an email that includes advice from the two principal attorneys on how to direct clients about that, okay? And I'll just briefly go over that. A lot of folks in RVs up here in King County have put my RV is a homestead in their front window. That perhaps makes folks feel good, but it doesn't do any good whatsoever because the law doesn't really recognize it formally in any way that helps folks. What does help folks is if they get impounded, that there are the release or the freedom from having fees as long as folks get on the ball right away and get a court hearing. Now, I don't know how it works in Tacoma Pierce, but that's one of the first things you have to figure out. What does happen when someone gets impounded with regard to the court, and what are their options? That's homework that you're going to need to do. But here, one of the things that's supposed to happen right away is if you get impounded, ask the impound lot for a magistrate's hearing. They fill out that paperwork. They're required to do that. Or you can call a phone number that we put out in a book that we circulate through parking enforcement. We call it the Red Book. It's on our website. I'll put that in the chat when I finish. You can see an example of it, but parking enforcement gives that out. Many outreach workers give it out. Essentially what it is advice to those living in vehicles to not be afraid of the court, that the court has options that are going to help them. Most people end up thinking, oh, I'm going to lose my vehicle if I talk to the court. Usually you're going to lose your vehicle if you don't talk to the court. So part of what the advice from the attorneys is, obviously make that hearing right away. The judge will have to consider your ability to pay. Since most people can't do that, the fines will usually be either reduced or eliminated. The charge the judge will usually give is that you have to go get the vehicle out of impound that day. It's imperative that you have the vehicle's owner available, or that you be the vehicle owner, because that's the impound lot's legal responsibility. And if you show up and you've only been living in it and you're not the owner, the state RCW doesn't protect you. That's one of the legislative changes that we're going to need to see happen. So then you get the vehicle out, and you may have to tow it out. Sometimes vehicles are not able to make it out of the lot on their own. All of these things, it's a concentrated way of describing a time in the person who's living in the vehicle's life when they literally need to think twice about, do they want to still live in a vehicle? And sometimes the vehicle itself is not worth retrieving. It can't be driven out. Sometimes it can't even be towed out. It's amazing they got it into the impound lot. So the whole time we do outreach with folks, we're constantly having a conversation with them about life in the vehicle. And invariably, as I think some of you have said already, the thing we hear is, this is my home. Well, it's the home that you know now. It may not be the home that you want to keep. And when we do outreach, we're the only funded outreach team through the regional authority right now. And so we do a contact sheet. And one of the things that we do, besides addressing issues that come up for folks that are tangible, like legal issues and tabs and so on and so forth, is that conversation. How's it going living in this vehicle? Are you getting tired of having to move around? Would you like to be out of this if it could happen? And so we start, even on our contact sheet, a rough survey. If you could go into housing and leave this right away, would you do it? They'll say yes. Or if you could go to a safe lot right now, would you do it? Yes. Do I want to live in this vehicle permanently somewhere? Some say yes. Usually when they say yes to that, we say, well, let's take a look at your vehicle. Is it really worthy to get someplace to do that? And where would it have to be? We'd probably have to send you to Pierce County or someplace outside Seattle. There are no such places in Seattle to do that. Up Highway 99, there's places south and north where you can do it, but it's expensive, and they check the quality of your vehicle before they'll accept you. So it's a very difficult choice. Most of those people are not, there's not many people living in a vehicle that's worth living in long term. So that issue of, and someone was mentioning early trauma, the issue of this is my home and this is the only place I know and where am I going to go is enormous. And we just often have to make many visits with folks to walk them through that conversation. And we're finding more and more of them are willing to say yes to going into homeless management information system, which is the first step toward housing, with the acknowledgement that it's going to take a while, but at least it opens another door that otherwise is not there. And some of you may be paying attention beyond your own city. The new mayor of Seattle has decided to address vehicle residency by sweeping relentlessly. Before it was just tents. Now we have RVs out there. The RV remediation that used to just go and clean around vehicles is now an occasion to impound if they can't move. So we're being taxed heavily. The regional authority is trying to talk the mayor out of this protocol, but at the same time, it seems like the mayor's opting out for voters who want to see him clean the streets. So it's taxing the whole system right now to just keep up. We just had a sweep up on Beacon Hill by the VA hospital, lost another 5 RVs that simply couldn't move in the short time frame. So that's the other thing we ask for, is if we're going to do a sweep and you think you're going to impound somebody, we need 2 months to get them moved. It takes that long. Many of the vehicles have more problems than any of you can list. Use your imagination. That's probably a problem that a vehicle has. And then, of course, the people inside the vehicle, which are the more important aspects of all this, themselves have just a long list of being accompanied that is required to move through this process. So we're really at a crisis point. The funding is still pathetic, I'll say it that way. Right now, the regional authority is providing, out of the millions of dollars, $200,000 to do vehicle outreach. And I know that because that's what we get. Next year, they've put more money on the table. It's still going to be pathetically short. So let's see. We've moved on to, let me finish with Long versus Seattle. The legislature didn't do anything about Long versus Seattle that was decided last spring. So we went to the state attorney general's office and we've been having conversations with them. The principals of the bill and other lawyers from around the state are now scheduled, along with me, to meet in a week or two, again with the attorney general's office, to put something in effect that will appear as law for guidance to judges and others regarding the enforcement of Long versus Seattle. But we need more than that. We'll need RCW changes. We'll need a lot of things that have to happen legislatively. Also, RV Safe Lot has been approved. The meetings have started through Low Income Housing Institute. You know them because they've done tiny homes in Tacoma. That probably isn't gonna, they want to start before winter, but it's going to take a while to roll that out. The goal is 35 spaces with a fast turnover. In other words, some people will be put in there who we think can be moved into housing more quickly than others, and their mindset might be more aligned with getting into housing quicker if they think they're going to into the safe lot. There will be no long-term RVs in the safe lot. People will have to agree with that. Another thing we're proposing that already made its way into apparently being considered for the mayor of Seattle's budget are what we're calling nests. Nests are using the public street, and four-ish RVs that are adjacent to each other and have been there for a long time, creating it as a protected zone, beginning outreach, giving porta potty, trash, and getting consent from each of them. They're willing to consider moving out or into some better place with their RV. Mostly that will be out of their RV. That's a pretty radical shift of some of the other ways along the West Coast that vehicles are being addressed on the streets where they're not swept. So we're very hopeful that can start much sooner than the safe lot and protect people on the streets. And the other thing that we're having to work on hard is connecting jurisdictions, even with not just Long, but also just the sentiment of the regional authority on vehicles. For example, King County was ready to sweep about 12.5 vehicles between Auburn and Kent that was on unincorporated street north of the Auburn golf course. And it took a lot of advocates to step in and stop that. It turns out the streets division wanted to clean it all up, unbeknownst to the executive and everybody else. So departments that are normally doing business as usual are sometimes the enemy doing business as usual. And so that was interrupted. Outreach was able to go in and help people. It's still in process, but that's partly what we see from jurisdictions who don't get themselves informed and part of the larger mandate to end homelessness as a region. So that's another issue. And of course, I look at Seattle and I don't think the mayor is clued in about ending homelessness when we have a sweeps schedule like we have. Political commentary. So what I'll do is send the email that I have from the attorney at Columbia Legal to Jeffrey. It's a little bit longer in explaining this tactic for those in vehicles who need to be informed. If they get impounded, ask for a hearing by a court immediately. As I said, you'll have to figure out what that is. It should be that it works for every impound lot that has to honor that, but I don't know how it happens within the court system in Tacoma and Pierce County. And then there's other things that we're still working on in terms of Fourth Amendment violations about whether the seizure is proper. They're putting orange tags on in Seattle. You have to move every 72 hours. Of course, they put no information on the tags. The Attorney General's office was very concerned about that. In other words, people don't really know who to be in touch with to stop this. It's either move or you get impounded. So there's just lots of harm we see. The other side of this, for those of us doing outreach, we've had a vehicle residency work group through the new plan. What we've decided to start saying is, it isn't just our little team of 5 people that's responsible for all the vehicles in Seattle, the 2,300 of them, or the 2,741 in King County. Everybody doing outreach has a job to do with people in vehicles as well as people in tents. So we're really from the bottom up saying this is how outreach needs to happen. We can't, because we go to a vehicle residency encampment and there's, like yesterday or the other 2 days ago at Beacon, there were at least 12.5 tents and there were 12.5 RVs. That's the way things are building out. And I'm sure you see the same thing. And I'll go up and ask someone where they're going to go. Are they going to take shelter? The people in tents get offered shelter. The people in RVs get offered shelter, but very few of them are going to take it unless they know the RV is just completely hopeless. And some of the ones there were. I don't have the report of how many of them took shelter. The other thing this does with an escalated sweep schedule is all of the available shelter goes to addressing just the sweeps and not any other work that the rest of the city folks in outreach are doing. So it's doing the same thing with our time. Our time is now having to aim at mitigating sweeps instead of doing outreach per our contract. So this is a constant complaint we have. The regional authority supports us, but the point ends up being, if we ignore the sweep, it'll be harm. So I think you're in similar straits. I don't know if your organization of doing that is prepared for the scope of how many folks you have in RVs, or if you're doing it kind of haphazardly, which is, by the way, better than not doing it at all. But at the same time, everyone asks when we go out, where can I go? Well, we tell them, well, they did North Lake 3 weeks ago and it's clear. And as long as they don't put barriers up, you can go back there. So it's a game of cat and mouse, but now they're also putting the parking barriers back in. People call them ecology blocks. We call them NIMBY blocks. They're putting those in so you can't go back and park where you were. In other words, they're removing right of way, which, by the way, is illegal according to the state RCW. It's illegal according to the city of Seattle. It's illegal to put those barriers out. In Seattle, it's a $1,000 fine for one of them. And one of the council members owns a brewery and has 60 of them around her business. Right. So I'm just saying, we're saying we just want the law enforced. So I'm probably beginning to rant here, and I was trying to cover all the bases because I really sort of came in to talk just about long, but I also want to just add that I heard you have on your page a link to a KUOW article about safe parking, and council members at Mello was responding about permitting. And I was kind of talking to the podcast while it was going on saying, cities can permit, but they have a very limited bandwidth of how they can permit with faith communities. And I know Jeffrey knows that, and I hope the legislative branch knows that, because we want faith communities to feel empowered to do things, not to feel like, oh, how do we squeeze through the eye of the camel here? Yeah, and that bill still is in effect. Jeffrey knows it well, and we want the legislators to know that, and we want the faith communities to know it, in part because it emboldens them to know that you don't have to go through a ringer to do a good job with people, and put the emphasis where it belongs, which is helping the people. So much of this talk, and I'll finish with this, is about the vehicles. It's about the people. The vehicles are what people look at and don't like seeing on the street, and the garbage, and I agree the garbage is enormous. Anyway, I'll stop there. If there's any questions, I know you have something where you're going to break out in a little while.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
we're
can
gonna
always
get to
stay
that
for
here
that, but I
shortly.
don't have much time after that, so.
Okay. So I do see a couple of questions for you, Bill. Teresa, you're first, and then Patricia.
Thank you, Bill. This is very informative. I have two things. One is, please don't send people to Pierce County, and we won't send them to King. And then,
Yeah, we don't send them, but as you know, people have free will and they go where they think they can.
yeah,
I mean,
I know, but the
Snohomish County feels the same way.
yeah. Then the other thing is that we just got a information from the county about the number of people living in cars here, and they are saying that it's 6% of the people who are homeless are living in cars here. And I know that Seattle had one that was 40%, and you're talking about a specific number of vehicles. I'm wondering, how do you collect that data?
Okay, well, we've been using data from the last point in time count where we actually went out in 2020. And that count showed 50% of the unsheltered were living in vehicles, 50% of the unsheltered homeless. That's the highest it's ever been. It's usually been a third. The regional authority has used two different methods now, one to satisfy HUD, and I'm not sure what number they actually put on vehicles in that, but they did show an increase in the number of homeless people. And the other figure they did was people who have touched homelessness, which is a number closer to the school's number, over 40,000. So that threw panic through everybody's face. But what we usually still say is that we think out of the unsheltered homeless that we've got anywhere between a third to half. And I'd be surprised if you're down at 6%.
Yeah, I wondered about that as well. And I wonder if people who do point in time counts in different counties, do people talk with each other about how to do that, best practices?
No.
Wouldn't that be a good idea?
But you have to be careful. Sometimes they're saying 6% of the entire homeless count. And that gets confused. And what are they including in the entire number? The data, my phrase on data is it's helpful, but I call it data-driven crazy. Because I think when they're trying to make decisions from data, they put in place the wrong protocols, almost always.
Thank you.
And one more question, Patricia.
It was just sort of a comment about the differences between King County and Pierce County. King County has some protective things that you can do through the court. Also, they also have protective things to not be evicted. So one of the things that are happening in Pierce County is that people don't have as much eviction rights and are being evicted or self-evicting into their vehicles, making them homeless with their vehicles. And it's a slow, slippery slope. You actually need more money in a vehicle than living in a home because you've got gas, you've got repairs. You can't live in your vehicle too long without like your vehicle starting to just show signs of wear and tear. There was something else. Oh, in regards to the point in time count, the point in time count was not done the same way through different counties. So they get different, it's supposed to be how many homeless people are where they're at. But the way that it was done was very different between King and Pierce, particularly for this year. And there's been lapse of a couple years with the waivers. So the accuracy of that data is now being looked at. And thank you for letting me share.
Yeah. Patricia, are you my Patricia from King County?
Yes, I'm your Patricia. I'm very much on both things, and that's something to be said. Like
good to see you here. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
All right. So thank you a lot, Bill, for the information and background. I think there is a lot that Pierce County and King County can share to learn to advocate and serve folks who are living in vehicles more effectively. One of the huge barriers here in Pierce County is that we don't currently have official sites where RVs can legally stay. So
well, neither do we actually.
We haven't gotten to that point yet, and we're certainly not as far along as Olympia is.
Did you hear me, Rob? We don't have that. We don't have that either. Olympia does, yes.
Yeah.
For a one street, but that's not all their vehicles either. So.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a growing problem for sure. So I'm going to have to shuffle around our agenda a bit. I do appreciate you being able to take the time to join us, Bill. I'm gonna flip over to our government updates before we get to our breakout conversation. The government updates will be about 10 minutes, so I don't know if you'll have the ability to stay, but I did want to thank you very much for sharing. So let's do that. Let's move over to our regular weekly government updates. And I would like to invite Caleb from the city of Tacoma to offer any updates you have to share with us.
Thanks, Rob, and hello, everyone. I have been on vacation for the last week, and so I see some of you have emailed me, and I appreciate that. I will be emailing you back today, Sally. I know you're one of them, so I know we have some conversations to be had, so I appreciate that for reaching out to me, and we can touch base. Two big updates. I know you guys were talking about 7th and Tacoma and that posting. It will be given a week. It looks like the 20th is the date it will start being removed. That one is estimated at 7 to 10 people, it looks like, and that is really the information that I have in terms of that authorization. I could give you outreach numbers too as well, if that's what people need. I will, though, one big one is 35th and Pacific. We are doing a shelter expansion there, and we have a community meeting on the 20th on that Wednesday night. And I'm actually going to post it in the chat on how to find the information, how to join that virtually. That is the website there that you guys can jump on, and it'll give you the Zoom linked information. This is going to be a mitigation site, and Tacoma Rescue Mission is going to be the provider for that site. And it's going to house, it's going to shelter 50 individuals. And it will be tents initially, and then it will transition into micro shelter. But it actually is going to be developing both sides of the property. So one side of the property will be developed first, and then once we have the funding secured, we'll actually develop the other side of the property and expand that that capacity. And I think it's going to expand to 50 more, so it'll be 100 total. So that is the project, and this is the community meeting. In terms of advocates and stuff like that, I know a lot of you are really interested in these model types. This is for some of you what you would probably consider a low barrier. The entry will be very limited, and the folks that are on there are hopefully going to get offered services and build relationships and continuing to build those so that we can find solutions for them as time goes on. So that is going to be kind of the big point. I know that there's a lot of community concern that I've seen traffic through the email as I've looked over it today. I have a lot of red on my voicemail, and I'm assuming it's a lot of concerns around that. So having people there that want to advocate for it, that want to talk about some of the solutions that this could bring would be really helpful from a lot of you folks. So if you are able to make that, that would be great. And I would appreciate that. I see a couple of hands up. Yeah.
So go ahead, Jay.
Yeah.
At the 7th in Tacoma, what are you going to do with the other people that aren't part of that 7 and 10? And how do you distinguish that 7 and 10 from the rest of the people that are there? How do you know whose tent that is? And what dignifies or calls for their removal? Like, what has started the process for this in particular encampment to be moved? And how many people in your hot team are going to be there? And are you going to sweep another site with a 72-hour warning at the same time like you did with Milwaukee cleanup when you were doing the 11th Street Bridge?
Great questions, Jay. Thank you. So there is no other removal process that I know that's in process right now. So I don't know if there's going to be another removal happening at the same time. That I don't know. The whole entire, so how the process usually is that it's built around 311 calls, 911 calls, and also neighbors that reach out to us specifically through various different ways to help elevate specific sites. And so that's usually how we determine on whether we do a removal in some locations before we do it in other ones. Did that answer your question, Jay?
Yes, but one other question. We have one person down there in particular that really does need some attention with the stitches that he has. I'm sure that if you've been down there, you know who I'm talking about. Do you guys have any kind of housing or resources for that individual in particular? And then we have another person who's down underneath the 11th Street Bridge who's more than willing, if he can get the assistance that he needs, to go up to the veterans area, and that has been made mention in the chat today, that there is a spot for him located close to up there. Are those potentials that you guys can get to before this sweep so that those individuals who are willing to take that assistance can get it?
So Jay, it sounds like there's a couple of individuals that are looking for shelter that just need access to help get to the 82nd and Pacific. Is that what I'm hearing? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So Jay, let's reach out to Javon and see if we can reach out to some of our partners to help with that. Especially if we have availability for those unique cases like the veterans. We would love to be able to help in any way and work with Fob Hope and seeing if we can help get them there. And then the HEAL team will be on site there and doing outreach beforehand all the way up until and while the removal process is happening.
Jeffrey, you have a question as well?
Good morning, Caleb.
Good morning.
I want to talk about the 35th and Pacific. I'm a little concerned about the sizes that you're talking about. I know low barrier, I'm happy about that. I am concerned about the size. Too many people get lost in the system when you have a large site like that. We've seen it too many times. It's normal. It's a normal process. People get lost. And safety for the people who are there is also a problem I see when you get 100 people living in tents. How are you going to mitigate the safety issue? Are you going to have police available like they do at the camp in Spokane? Or just what are you going to do? Camper-led camps work best when you have smaller numbers. When you have big numbers, it doesn't work. It does not work. So please, please take a look at this again and make sure that if you are going to do this, that you have adequate safety in mind, because safety is going to be a real critical thing there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. And yeah, as we will continue to be working with Tacoma Rescue Mission and focusing around that. I know that's a community concern. I know that's individuals concerned experiencing homelessness, and we want to be able to make sure that this is a dignified and humane experience and one that's going to actually lead towards stability in one way or another. So thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate that.
And one more question for you, Caleb, from Patricia.
It was just in regards to medical support or medical restoration. Those that become medically very vulnerable do end up being around others to try to get their needs met. But is there a way to be able to, I don't know the individual that Jay's speaking of, pick up somebody to understand that that is one of the reasons that they are homeless? Thank you. Or maybe continue to be homeless. It's just sort of a bigger conversation, but something to be highlighted. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Caleb, and I'm sure you're going to hear plenty more from us in the coming week, but I'm glad you had an opportunity to get away and have some vacation time. All right, so let's shift over to any updates from Jeff Rogers in Pierce County Human Services.
Yeah, I just would like to remind everybody that the inclement weather funding we have available, that funding opportunity is still open. Applications are due by 4:30 p.m. next Friday, July 22nd. And hopefully next week we'll be releasing another funding opportunity for temporary emergency shelter. These funds will be available from October 1 through December 31 of 2023, a 15-month period, with the possibility of being renewed at that time. What we're looking for is someone to implement a pallet type of sheltering program, temporary emergency shelter, in the county areas outside of Tacoma. And that funding opportunity will be available next week. And you can find all of these materials on the county's Human Services website.
Great. And Jeff, is there any chance that that NOFA for the additional shelter opportunity could be shared with if one of your staff could share it with the coalition mailing list?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
It's planned to be out next week, but I can't guarantee until the day comes.
Yeah. Okay. And I see Jan has her hand up.
Hi, Jeffrey. Good to see you again. I have a question, which is, inasmuch as your already contracted service providers don't know at what point they can be reimbursed for expenses that exceed the contract in inclement weather settings, this contract that you're offering for $20,000, would emergency supplies like water come from that $20,000, or would whoever gets that contract have the authority to guarantee payment of funds to cover inclement weather? In other words, right now, there's some confusion on whether or not there can be reimbursement by any of your contracted providers for anything below 84.5 degrees on any 15-minute period within any 72-hour period. So since the county has not yet come up with a recognized trigger that activates an emergency weather response, will this agency have the authority to either buy supplies or guarantee that existing contracted providers can get reimbursed for supplies?
My understanding is that they will be able to make available supplies and distribute supplies to providers who need them. As you mentioned, a trigger has not been finalized. There's numbers going around. There's multiple jurisdictions in Pierce County that do emergency management services, and each of them have different triggering points. And so we're trying to come together and figure out what's the appropriate trigger point. And we know the city of Tacoma is at 85 degrees in hot weather, but we have not finalized that number. It's very, very close to being finalized. The final draft is almost ready to be sent out for comments from people. So we'll make sure we share it with this group as well for any comments you may have regarding what's in the document. So yeah, it's coming, but the intent is that these funds are to be used to purchase supplies and provide supplies that can be distributed during inclement weather incidents. If $20,000 is not sufficient, there will be the opportunity to increase this contract as need arises. We don't know exactly what the need will be because we don't know what inclement weather will look like the rest of the summer or into the winter months. The contract will go through June of next year, and we will encourage all of our providers that do this work to apply for money, which we tell them every year, to put into their budgets inclement weather supplies. So if you're an outreach provider on this call, please put into your budget, when you ask us for money next year, a line item for inclement weather supplies. We have been asking for years, and what happens is folks don't ask for that money, and then we end up in this challenge situation. So we'll encourage you next year when we open up our funding process to apply, and hopefully agencies will ask for supplies so that we don't get to this challenge of people not knowing what resources they can use to purchase supplies.
Thank you, Jeffrey, Jeff, and Ed has a question for you, I believe.
Jeff, we're not a provider. However, the coalition has provided numbers that are required for funding. The other thing is, within these NOFAs, are there guarantees of getting paid? within a 2-month or 3-month period, because if we ask a provider to go ahead and purchase for an emergency, we certainly don't want them hung out on the financial side. And from information that I've received, we have providers that are 8-9 months and longer that haven't been paid from your organization, even though their contracts have said 25 days. Is there any way you can convince us? Tell us.
What I can share with you, there's no provider that's waited 8 or 9 months. County closeout is on December 31st of every year, and any dollars that we owed through December 31 of last year have to be paid by the month of January. There's strict deadlines. Any state funding that we have has to be submitted and paid by July, because the state's calendar year ends, or their fiscal year ends June 30th. So we've gone through a period, unfortunately, of our department's contracting process being reviewed, which as a result has ended up in delays in contracting because of the type of process we have, the number of people that review a contract, not just in our department, but in our our prosecuting attorney's office, our risk management office, our finance office, our executive's office. There's this long chain of people that have to review and approve a contract before it can be executed. And so we're going through like a lean process, I guess I would call it right now, to figure out what's the most efficient and effective way to get contracts implemented and executed. So we're in a period of, I gotta be careful how I say this. I have an opinion, but I can't give my personal opinion. I'm here as a county employee. Of transition is the word I'll use. Sometimes it's frustrating for us as staff to deal with this issue, but we're working our way through it. And the hope is that moving forward here soon, we will be very timely in executing contracts.
I understand you have rules and regulations and things, but we have 2 vendors that are hanging out 8-9 months. So
well, I'd like to know who they are. If they're willing to share with me who they are, I'd love to do some research on that.
I will not venture their names for them.
Well, if they want to get in touch with me directly, please have them reach out to me. I'd be really curious to know who they are.
Thank you.
All right. And Jeff,
and actually what I would say is this, and I know that people are eager to get work done, but sometimes if I were a provider, I would not enter into providing services until I had a contract with a government entity. There's no guarantee if you start services without a contract that you're going to get paid. Sometimes contracts fall through the cracks and don't happen. So if I were a provider, I don't know that I would necessarily provide services without a contract in place.
Jeff, one additional question regarding current service providers that have contracts with the county, who maybe didn't include funding for supplies in their contract applications. Is there an opportunity for those agencies, those organizations, to ask to amend the contracts?
There would not be any additional funding provided. They're more than welcome to use the contracts they have in place to provide those services. They're an eligible activity, they're an eligible line item in the funding that they're receiving. So they would have to use their current contract award to provide those funds from. We will not increase any contracts. The only contract that may be increased would be the contract for this inclement weather program specific, if $20,000 isn't sufficient for the targeted purpose of what we've anticipate or don't anticipate. I don't know how we can anticipate. We don't know.
Right.
That's my understanding.
You have a crystal ball, Jeff. We know you have a crystal ball.
I wish. If I did, I'd want to find the 6 winning lotto numbers and win me a big lotto jackpot and enjoy the rest of my life, I guess.
All right.
I don't.
Thank you, Jeff. And let's shift over to see what Valerie has to tell us from rental assistance.
So Valerie with Rental Assistance Program. So currently we are at 80% of our budget spent, which is great news. Our 9 amazing local nonprofits have done a phenomenal job. That doesn't include the City of Tacoma funding, although we do track it and it does go through the portal. So shout out to the City of Tacoma for being such amazing partners with us and keeping everything in the main. I can't imagine if we had to done this with all different portals and applications and just craziness, right? I can also tell you that I sent an email to the coalition, but we are closing our portal to new applications August 1st. So what that means is we are still processing applications. We are still, our 9 amazing nonprofits are still going to be working as hard as they are now, but we are closing the portal to new applications and to updates. The reason for that is, one, based on our calculations, we have enough applications to fully spend down the last 20% of our grant, which is great news, right? Like, this is a COVID response program. 2, the increase in fraud in new applications is astronomical. And some of the things we have seen are really creative and people who could make millions doing legitimate work if we could get them shifted in a new direction. So based on that, so we're shutting the portal down, and then we're going to start gearing up very quickly and releasing a notice of funding availability very soon for our permanent rental assistance program. So we will be looking at between 1 and 5 or between 1 and 3 agencies to do our permanent rental assistance program. The first year will be 8 million, just under 8 million. Every year after that will be about $4 million. So be on the lookout for that. I will make sure everyone has it. We'll do a big meeting, the whole 9 yards, and make sure we do as much outreach as possible, as well as just give you a heads up. We're going to try to put policies and procedures in there and everything, so you know what you're signing up for and how kind of convoluted it might be. So that's it. And I have new internet. So look, I have a face. Good news on the
We knew
cake.
you were there the whole time, Valerie.
I know, I am.
All right, thank you for the update and for using the mailing list to give us an early notice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jenny from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, what do you have to share with us this week?
Good morning, everyone. I am going to keep my updates focused on COVID today in the interest of time, but just a reminder that I've been sending out a weekly Friday afternoon email to everyone on the listserv, kind of summarizing talking points from the week, updates about COVID and other things. So I will be including information there about the evolving MPV situation. MPV is monkeypox virus, but I'll stick with COVID today. So we have new variants of Omicron out in the community. We've got BA4 and BA5. I'm sure folks have heard about that. These are new subvariants of Omicron that are driving the recent infections in the US, and transmission is very high. I think it's 80% of new cases probably are these variants, and estimates that 10% or more of Americans will be infected by these variants. So CDC says that the subvariants are just more transmissible and more immune evading. They spread like other variants, they spread faster in communities with low vaccine rates. And unfortunately, and I just learned this yesterday, only 25% of our Pierce County residents are up to date on vaccines. And what that means is that we're using that language up to date to mean you have your primary series and then you are boosted if you're eligible. So that's really unfortunate. So about 70% of us here in Pierce County have had our primary series, but only 25% are up to date. So very, very important to get boosted. But back to the variants, just want to kind of talk a little about symptoms. It does look like the most common symptoms are those cold-like symptoms: cough, runny nose, congestion, fatigue. So that's not unlike other variants. Fevers, sore throat, headache, muscle pain also occur, but it looks like loss of taste and smell may be less common. So that is what is being seen in the BA4 and BA5. So there are really 5 ways to sort of ride this new wave. That's how Dr. Caitlin Jedalina of your local epidemiologist talks about this, which I really like her approach. One is get vaccinated. So I shared our numbers of vaccination, or how much of our community is vaccinated with you. We are also seeing the uptake of vaccines among the littlest community members. So 6 months to 5 years is very, very low. So that's concerning. So if you are 50 plus, you should get a booster. If you're eligible for your first, you're way beyond time to get a booster. You need to be getting your second booster. I will share the CDC page that outlines eligibility, and you can always reach out to me if there's any confusion or you have any questions. People who are immunocompromised and who are under 50 years old are also eligible. Research shows that while the vaccines that we have now may not be as effective in preventing infection from the new variants, they're still effective preventing severe disease, hospitalization, et cetera. And boosters really, really, really matter because vaccines, the immunity we get from vaccines wanes over time. The immunity we get from being infected wanes over time. So you are not safe if you had COVID already. You need to make sure you are keeping yourself as vaccinated as possible. And then the really good news is that we expect that in October, November, vaccines that have a better matching to these new variants will be available. So I want to stress that if you're eligible to get a booster now, don't wait and think, well, in October, they'll have a better booster. You will still be able to get boosted later. So that's my booster soapbox. Those who are positive for COVID and who are high risk for the really negative, severe impacts from COVID are eligible for the Test to Treat program. I've talked about that before, but that is access to Paxlovid. So please share that with your networks. I'll share the flyer in the chat. Wear a mask. I don't know about you, but it seems like everyone's kind of done with masking, but indoor spaces, crowded spaces, public spaces, especially, please, please, please wear a mask. Another way to ride the wave is to make sure you're looking at increasing ventilation in places where you work and serve. So I'm going to share a resource from the CDC to walk through what to think about in terms of ventilation. So if you're in an organization, run a shelter, et cetera, looking at your ventilation and how you can enhance that. And then finally, using at-home tests to stop the spread. So the antigen tests are really great at detecting highly infectious people. They usually they can catch up to 97% of cases in the first week of symptoms. So test, and that's a way that you can know that you're not going, you can change your behavior so you're not spreading. If you have symptoms and get a negative test, test again in a couple of days. If you have questions about where to get tests, you're not stocked up on at-home tests, I'll share a couple links there. One for our Washington State free COVID test to be delivered to your home or to your organization, and then one from the US Postal Service. You can sign up directly there. You can also get tests at a couple public libraries and Pierce County Library Systems. And I'll share some other links as well. Any questions, comments, things for me?
I see Jay asking about the boosters that have been approved, and it's 2 at this point.
Let me read.
But you have to make sure you qualify for the second.
How many boosters have been approved? Many people I know are in their second booster. Yeah, excuse me. Yes, many people are eligible for a second booster. The CDC actually, surprisingly, their link that I'm going to share really outlines it quite nicely and better than I could explain. But basically, not everyone's eligible yet, but people who are 50 plus should be getting a second booster, and those who are younger and fall into certain medical categories as well. And I think under 50, I think that'll be coming soon. Second booster will be coming soon, but I don't know about that yet. Hope that helps, Jay. Any other questions or comments for me?
Not seeing anything. Yeah, Teresa with a comment there.
New learning from yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do not assume everyone in your dental office is fully vaccinated. Huh. That is very interesting. The healthcare, the governor mandated that healthcare workers be vaccinated. So maybe this is an issue of, this is someone who needs a booster and has been vaccinated, fully vaccinated with their primary series, but has not had a booster that they're eligible for yet. That's very unfortunate. And thank you for that tip, Teresa. It's good for all of us to be asking if we're in vulnerable situations.
All right. Thank you very much, Jenny. And if other folks have questions they want to ask in the chat, I'm sure Jenny can catch them there. And really do appreciate the emails you've been sending to the list. They're really
oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah, really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad to see people like that. It's kind of gotten to be my Friday routine. So, okay.
Yep, it's
Cheers.
very useful.
Cheers.
All right, so let's backtrack a little bit. Let's talk about first the breakout review from last week's discussion. So Timothy, you ready to do that? I can put it on screen.
Yep, I'm ready to go. A little while ago, I uploaded the notes to the chat. So that's easy for people to get to if you want to have a copy of your own. I also want to remind people that Garrett always posts these notes on the coalition website every week. So last time we talked about what qualitative information should the county collect to make our systems work better. And I put a little definition of qualitative versus quantitative just to kind of clarify that for people, because we got feedback on both. I'll start with hitting some high points on the suggested qualitative questions. Some of them are like, what led you here? What's your biggest barrier to housing? What's working and what's not? What single thing has been most effective or helpful for you? The good old magic wand question. There were a number of responses that kind of grouped around the theme of the importance of getting to stories and personal narratives. And when we talk to people, somebody talked about trying to assess where folks are at in their own personal change story, and what would be helpful to them. And another group brought up the adverse childhood experience questionnaire, and whether they raised the question of whether there's anything in there that might be worth adopting. I put a short list after that of some of the more quantitative questions that people suggested. And then there's a kind of a long section on what were really process suggestions for getting good qualitative feedback. And I do want, you might notice that the notes this time are longer than usual. That's a good thing. And I really appreciate people stepping up on the note taking last time. We had a little talk about that, and the information that was dropped in the chat was more robust than usual, and I really appreciate people hearing that. Suggestions on getting good qualitative feedback. A lot of folks just talked about addressing the humanity of people that you're talking with. It always helps to begin by treating people like human beings. There were a number of suggestions that sort of centered around the notion of lived experience and making sure that we get to that in our questions, and the importance of asking the people who know best what they need. Somebody talked about more equity-based questions, and another group brought up the issue of being aware of implicit bias. Several groups talked about broadening the lens that we see through to be more inclusive of the kind of broader community and the whole dynamic that is at stake. And then back to the theme again at the end of treating folks like people. And finally, there was a recommendation around focus groups and giving people gift cards for participation, and allowing people some choice in what kind of gift cards are going to be more useful. There's a short list of some other issues that arose in the group discussion. centering on respite care, medical support, and then finally, feelings and frustrations about how stuck we are in making a dent on homelessness. The notes sort of end with a cry of despair, leavened with a call for connection. So there we go. That's the roundup, and happy to do this.
Thank you as always, Timothy. It adds a lot of value to what we talked about last week, and it's a great reminder as we go into our breakout conversation for today. The folks who choose to be our note takers, the better your notes that you're able to paste into the chat when you come back from your conversation, the better review that we can have. It gives Timothy more to work with. So thank you for that last week, and I am sure everybody's going to have a high standard again this week. So we've talked a lot today about safe parking and people living in vehicles. And so we thought it would be a good idea to talk about what our community can do to better serve people living in vehicle homes in Pierce County. And your answer, yes, it could be a lot, but more specifics would probably be helpful. So let me set us up in small breakout rooms, and I think we will do a 10-minute conversation. Let's see here. So I'm going to put everybody in rooms of 5 or 6 folks, and we will come back here. Why don't I say we'll come back here at 10:48. So away we go. And again, the question is, what can we do to better serve people living in vehicle homes in Pierce County? So welcome back, everyone. I know that was a shorter conversation time than any of us would have liked, but I hope that it was a good conversation and we have some good notes to share in the chat. That makes Timothy's job easier for next week. So please do put your notes from today's session in the chat, and we will revisit to see what we learned and shared next week. And now I am looking at our blown up agenda and seeing what we can do next. I will be very quick on an advocacy update. I am not aware of any particular opportunities in the coming week that are currently showing up. However, there's always the possibility that Pierce County Council will be talking about something that would be of interest to us. If that is the case, then either Sally or I will share that through email when they get their agendas out later today. City of Tacoma does not have any items related to homelessness on their agenda Tuesday. However, they are considering a contract for one of the companies that does the debris removal in encampments. If you have an interest in that issue, many of us do, it might be worth looking at their agenda to see their agenda packet to see how much the city is spending on that. So let's shift over to, well, I'm going to push past the safe sites for all update for a moment so that we make sure we have the opportunity to take a public vote on the statement regarding representation, coalition representation. So Rosemary, do you want to share that statement as it exists, and so we can do a quick poll?
So I know our time is short, but for people who weren't here last week, I just want to give the context that the governance work group and the steering committee provide you today with an opportunity to prove a statement we introduced last week regarding when we speak as a coalition and when we speak for ourselves, inspired by our participation in the coalition and our own lights. And if approved, we'll use this statement on our website and for other communications to affirm that we welcome diverse perspectives, to encourage individual and group actions in support of our mission, and to reserve our speaking as a coalition for those times we've agreed to a position or an action or delegated such action during one of these general Friday meetings. So the statement will serve as our approach for now to the question of who represents the coalition and what is the coalition position. As a reminder, our mission states that the Tacoma-Hearst County Coalition in Homelessness connects and mobilizes people to take action to end homelessness. And then Rob, if you can put up the statement that we're asking people for approval today, we will take that vote.
All right. So actually, if you could put the statement in chat.
I will have to find it now. I wasn't thinking I would be doing that.
Well, I can actually probably grab it real quick here too. Because I had you email it to me last night. So here it is. So that is the statement we are going to consider. And what I've created is a very simple poll that I will launch now.
So Rob, let me read that first for people in case there's someone who can't have access to that so they can hear it. The coalition welcomes diverse perspectives and actions. Participants act as individuals and groups and may invite others to join them. We speak with one voice when positions and actions are affirmed through majority vote at a weekly general coalition meeting.
Thank you, Rosemary. So I just launched the poll. It just asks, do you agree with the representation statement? And it's a yes, no, or it needs more work. And we'll just do a couple of moments here, give people an opportunity to weigh in. And so far, about 45% of folks here have participated. I know we're pasting things in the chat from the breakout conversations. So let me give it just another moment or so here, see if we can get a few more folks to weigh in. Ten more seconds. All right, so we've got about 57% of folks have participated. There is overwhelming support for this representation statement as it is. So I would like to thank Rosemary and the folks from the governance work group for tackling this. And again, it will go up on our website soon as we build out an about section of the coalition website. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Real quick, Jan, is there anything we need to talk about for the Safe Sites Committee?
I'll skip a committee report. Everybody's invited Monday, noon, Zoom, be there. But can I give a quick success story?
Sure.
Okay, the MRC CHW Tacoma Health Department team had gone to 35th and Pacific and in doing qualitative interviews. Timothy gave a great description of the difference between quantitative and qualitative. In doing qualitative interviews on healthcare statuses, we discovered a man in his 80s suffering from Agent Orange, my generation, Agent Orange, okay, who was just arrived at 35th and Pacific, wanting to be next to his grandson. I called CLR. The next day, a Comprehensive Life set their path team. Christine and Orlando came. The man said he did not want to go anywhere else. He wanted to stay there because his grandson was there and needed him. Christine and Orlando went the next day and said, you would do your grandson perhaps a little more help if you could get healthy. They talked him into finding a safer place. Monica Brown took him in to FOB, new site on 82nd Pacific Avenue. And now that man is being provided health care and he's in the system for better housing. And he's under the care, loving care and tenderness of Monica Brown. So that took a lot of different moving parts to make this happen, which is part of the complexity of what we do. So I want to thank everybody that is part of that team. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. And just one reminder, it's Monique at FOB Hope. So yeah, no problem. And thank you for sharing that success story, because we always have to have those before we close out a meeting. We have a couple minutes left. Does anybody have any items that they need to share with the group for the good of the order? Richard?
I put it in chat. Next Wednesday is the sweep at 7th in Tacoma. Y'all come out, we'll have coffee and maybe donuts, and mainly to be witness, to watch what's going on, to help people. It's a chance to find out what people's needs are that are being swept. And there's a large sidewalk at the Methodist Church across the street, so there's actually a lot of room. It's a fairly convenient place to park and to safely walk around. So if you're interested at all, come on.
Great, thank you, Richard. And anyone else? Jay?
And yesterday they were asking for places to go, room to get to, assistance. So if you're a service provider, TRM, otherwise, when you hear it, please go out. They were very receptive yesterday, extremely receptive.
Thank you, Jay. All right, so if you do have feedback on this week's meeting, please provide that in the chat so we can make sure that we continue to try to improve these meetings. I hope this was a worthwhile time for everybody this morning, and I appreciate spending this time in community with everyone. We will have a small group of us planning for next week's meeting right after this, after a 5-minute break. Otherwise, I'd like to wish everyone a happy weekend, safe time, and we'll see you all next Friday. Thank you.